Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 2482, and today, 2 got us 4 ghost/paranormal stories. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. But you can always wait till the end for the Sunday word. So, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. The team that created the corn maze for the Animal Country Fair were prepared to deal with finding lost children. Just not the ones who were lost last year. Moved out of my childhood home with my fiance, and I can sleep again. Here's the story of that house. By Stonewall 30 NYR. I'll separate the individual stories and I'll gladly answer any questions, but I legitimately grew up in a haunted house. It's not like in the movies. There's sometimes months between events and then something happens and it just surrounds you with an oppressive feeling. Always feeling watched, uncomfortable, and unwelcome there in an otherwise wonderful childhood/family. Growing up, I was scared of that place, but I didn't know why. I loved being there, but it was creepy. I could hear footsteps in the attic, which wasn't even walkable, it was unfinished. I could see dark shapes moving at night, but the worst thing to happen was one night I couldn't fall asleep, and it was 11 p.m., which was late for me. I was watching cartoons, and out of nowhere a stack of loose leaves get flung off the shelf and go halfway across the room, papers flying everywhere. I turned on the lights so fast it had to be a record. Coming from a huge family, it was almost unheard of to be home alone. But one Thanksgiving, after a shift at CVS, which is a drugstore in the States, I went home to change before meeting up with my family at my aunt's house. I'm upstairs in my room when I hear clear as day footsteps of someone walking around, opening and closing cabinets and the trash can. I go down thinking someone was waiting for me to give them a ride, when I realized that I was actually alone. I was hit with a feeling of dread and felt surrounded, so I noped the F out of there. I know what you'll tell me, it's just interference, but across from the Xbox 360, PS4, PS5, Discord on my laptop, and 5 different phones, people have told me that they've heard what sounded like an old man and a young girl arguing, even though there wasn't anyone talking in my house. Once on the PS4, one of their mics was echoing and I heard it myself, and it felt like it was right behind me. They were screaming stuff like, "See? We've been telling you about this shit for years, dude." My little sister, about 6 years old, with tears in her eyes, mentioned, "The shadows that move around and are darker than the darkest part of the room." My dad, who's the biggest skeptic and yells at us all for scaring ourselves whenever we talk about our experiences, came downstairs one night pale as humanly possible. For reference, he's Italian and so tan that as a kid I thought he was a black man, and told us that while watching the Yankees game in his room, he felt like someone was there, so he rolled over and there was a shadowy figure just leaning over the bed staring at him. He believed us after that, lol. I had a dream that my dad was going to ask me to put away the Christmas decorations in the basement. I brought down the nativity and remember thinking I probably shouldn't let baby Jesus be face down for some reason, so I made sure I placed him face up. When I went down with the next few things, I noticed he was face down and was like, "F, that's not good." And I looked up and saw a 7-foot-tall shadow figure with a weird wolf-like head on a humanoid body, Without facing me or moving, it kind of just spoke in my head. "I found you," over and over until I woke up. There are many more stories to tell, but basically those are most of the biggest. In general, it was just a day-to-day feeling of being watched or creeped out. I had trouble sleeping there because I always felt like something was there when I closed my eyes. But thank God now I moved and I've not experienced even 1/10 of the stuff. But I still randomly will get this little feeling or hear a faint whisper. It's funny. I live literally with a cemetery as my backyard, and experienced practically nothing compared to that house. All my life I wished Pokemon were real, so I was ecstatic when my wish came true last week. But when the reports started flying in of massive earthquakes, summer ice storms, and children disappearing from their own birthday parties, I realized that having only 300 people in each game wasn't due to constraints on the Game Boy technology. Footsteps in the Loft by EI95. Coming on here to share a story of an old house I lived in when I was younger. Brace yourself, it may be long. We moved in there as a family, my parents, my brother, and I, when I was around 7. It was a semi-detached UK house, with 2 bedrooms and a loft. The bedroom my brother and I shared had access to the loft via a standard door and a staircase leading up to the large loft ensuite. My father used to sleep and work there before he moved out, as my parents were separated for a long time before their divorce. While he still lived there, however, I became accustomed to the sounds of him walking in the loft and down the stairs to me and my brother's bedroom. This is important for later. Again, I knew the inside and out what footsteps sounded like when someone was in the loft, or walking down the stairs to the bedroom. Anyway, before my father moved out, a lot of stuff happened between him and my mother. So I remember starting to feel a deeply troubling energy whenever I was in the house. After he left, I still continued to hear footsteps of someone pacing up and down the loft and sometimes down the stairs to the door where my brother and my bedroom was. My mother would often go up there to use the ensuite, so there were many occasions where I heard the pacing and went up thinking I'd find my mother there, but the loft would be empty. I heard these footsteps a lot in the evenings, all the way from downstairs in the living room. They were heavy, and sometimes would slow down or speed up. I dreaded when my mother would send me up there to get some wrapping paper or something else. I distinctly remember walking up to the landing where the main bathroom, master bedroom, and my bedroom, while still hearing these footsteps going back and forth. I reached the attic door, and the minute I would open it, they would stop. Sometimes, when I felt brave, I'd do a thorough check of the loft space and ensuite. Again, finding no one there. This went on for months, maybe even a year. And to add to the footsteps, the door which led to the loft began to sometimes open slightly and then slam shut. I put it down to a draft despite no windows being open and despite the force in which it was being slammed. I also deeply considered that I, an 8-year-old, was going crazy. I thought maybe the divorce and the negative experience in the house were making me see and hear things, and I was resolved to confide in my mother for help, which I didn't. One day, my mother wanted to go food shopping. There was a Safeway about 40 minutes walk away from the house, but on that specific day, I was too tired to do the 40-minute walk, and I threw a tantrum, adamant I was going to stay home by myself. My brother and mom left, and I sat down on the sofa to watch TV. The sofa was against the wall of the staircase leading up to the landing with the bedrooms. After about 20 minutes, I began to hear the footsteps pacing the loft and started getting spooked. I remember thinking, it's all good, they'll stop soon, or if they don't, nothing bad will happen. There's nothing up there. And then they started coming down the loft stairs. At this point, I turned the TV volume way up. I consoled myself with the idea that this was a usual thing, and I remember telling myself, it's okay, they'll stay there. But they didn't. I started hearing them heavily walking across my room. That feeling was like absolute horror, like someone was up there and now knew I was alone. Again, I thought, okay, as long as they stay a floor above me, I'll be good. I calculated in my head that the steps should have reached the top of the staircase leading to my floor by now. I held my breath, heard nothing, and was about to dismiss it all as stupidity, but then it started walking slowly but loudly down the stairs just behind me. To the right of me was the door entering the living room, and I made the decision that I was not going to look, because there was something there, and I could hear that something was there. Anyway, I started singing to myself. I sang Twinkle Twinkle Star so loudly over and over again. And to be honest, I don't remember much after that, apart hearing a knock on the door after what felt like literally only a minute, even though my brother and mother were probably only halfway to Safeway, and then opened it to see both my mother and brother back with the shopping. The footsteps continued after that like they did before this day, as well as the door slamming. I never told anyone, and he moved shortly after. I never brought it up again until I was about 11. By then, I had chalked these events down to my life at that house having a negative effect on my mental health. So my brother and I had gone to dinner with my dad at a Pizza Express, and he must have been talking about spooky things. I thought, oh, why not tell them what I experienced in that house? I told the story in a brief way with not much detail. I looked up to see my brother literally go pale. All he said was, I heard them too. And he went on to describe the sound, the speed, the heaviness of the footsteps. The change of direction, the doors slamming, all of it. My father suggested it was a neighbor due to the house being semi-detached. But even as an 8-year-old, I was thorough. I made sure I could defend it. I often heard neighbors running or going up and down the stairs. And that wasn't it. Without telling my wife, I made a deal with the devil to exchange my firstborn for my newborn daughter's life. As her delicate eyes fluttered open, my wife clutched her heart and fell dead. The Green Woman by Big Tack Bro. I made a post a couple of days ago recounting the time I was being watched by a shadow while working. I got one more quick encounter that I believe to have been paranormal. It's not nearly as creepy as a shadow, though. When I was a kid, around 7 years old I think, I spent the day at a cousin's house in my old hometown. He lived right in the middle of town, so we could ride our bikes everywhere. This was back in '98, and in the tiny place I come from, everyone knows everyone and keeps an eye out for the safety of any kids they see. When my mom dropped me off at my aunt's house that morning, she gave me some money to be able to go to the corner store for snacks for my cousin and I. After a while, hunger struck and took off on my bike to Reeves Grocery. It was the best stock store in town. There were only 2 stores. Pulling up, I noticed an old maroon-colored car parked outside. Reeves store's front was a short brick wall about a quarter of the way up, but from the brick up to the roof was all glass. The type of glass that you can see through on one side, but is mirrored on the other. I didn't pay the car too much mind at first. I rode up onto the sidewalk and gently rested the handlebars of my bike against the wall. I hopped off my bike and, by force of habit, I looked into the store's window. In the reflection behind me in the old maroon car sat a little old lady in the passenger seat. She was dressed in all green, dark green, wearing a barrette hat, and she had on one of those crocheted Afghan blankets draped around her shoulders. She looked very, very old. Deep wrinkles covered her face to the point that I couldn't even see her eyes, and her skin had a gray tint to it. She smiled sweetly at me in the mirror, but that's when I turned around to wave and smile back. She wasn't in the car. Confused, I glanced back at the store window and I could still see her sitting there in the passenger seat, smiling at me. Fight or flight kicked in and I aborted all thoughts of 3D Doritos and Gatorade and raced off as quick as I could. Hell, I didn't even get on my bike. I grabbed it by those handlebars and pushed it as I ran as fast as my little legs would go. Looking back, the little lady really seemed to mean me no harm. Her wrinkled face looked kind, her smile was warm, but my 7-year-old brain yelled ghost and told me to run. When I told my mom about it a few days later, she told me sometimes spirits get stuck or have unfinished business, so they can't pass on. I remember this encounter fondly these days, though, and wish I could have better reacted to the situation. Maybe I could have helped the green lady somehow. Reincarnating into a rock for being a murderer seemed like a stupid punishment. But nobody told me I'd be feeling the scorching sun, drowning in the river, suffocating under other rocks, and oh God, where are these kids going to throw me? Shadow in the Tree Line by Dig Tac Bro. This is a cross post from another forum because I feel like it's paranormal, but I'm not entirely sure. The other Reddit page I posted to said no paranormal stories, so I just wanted to be on the safe side. This might end up being a long story, but I want to be as detailed as possible. I work for my city's water department. My everyday job consists of repairing leaks or doing new installations for businesses and homes. There are 2 parts to our water department that keeps everything running. Distribution, where I normally work, and production. Production deals with the chemical side of things. They chlorinate the water and do water sample checks. Production is also responsible for the upkeep of our water well sites and our water storage facilities, like the tall water towers you might have seen in your city. Mowing grass is one of those responsibilities. Both parts of our department are extremely understaffed right now, so we sometimes give the production guys a hand with the grass when they need it. A couple weeks ago, it was my turn, and here is where the weirdness begins. My city is in central Louisiana with a population of about 45,000 people. We're surrounded by a wooded area. No matter which way you travel into or out of town, you're going to see plenty of trees. As such, a lot of our well sites are located out in the boonies. Most of our city trucks are four-wheel drive with mud grip because it's needed more often than not. I had the foresight to cut that day. I headed out just before sunrise to the one at the end of the long dirt road, where if trouble strikes, your phone better be charged because no one is going to be able to hear you yell for help. Surprisingly, this isn't where my strange encounter took place. The sun was rising and I was approaching my first sight, and on the road ahead of me stepped out a doe and her two fawns. Excitedly, I hurried to snap some pictures. To my surprise, the mama and her babies were not afraid of the loud, rumbling diesel I was driving. The speckled fawns made their way across the path as Mom calmly watched me in the truck. Once the babies were safely across, she looked back the way she came and then joined the little ones in the tree line on the opposite side of the road. I breezed through my mowing, loaded the equipment back onto the trailer, and texted my mom the picture of the deer as I head back into town. My mom messaged me back saying, "I've read that deer are an omen of good fortune. Looks like you're going to have a great day. Be safe. I love you." And I did have a great day. I knocked out the next 2 sites without issue and everything was going smoothly, until I reached the gates of the last place I had to mow. McKeithen site is the biggest one we have that's closer to town. It's about the size of a football field. It's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's on the outskirts of the city. There's normally plenty of traffic that travels the road there, so there's really no feeling of seclusion, even though it's surrounded by thick woods on 3 sides. I've cut this spot plenty of times, but that day felt different. I pulled the truck through and hopped out to lock the gate behind me. Immediately, I felt like I needed to get back in the truck as quickly as possible. I made my way down the driveway to park near the tower like I have done many times before. But after I parked and killed the truck, everything felt heavy and silent. I don't know how long I sat until I was able to will myself to open the door and get out. Instantly, I felt eyes on me. The feeling was coming from the back right corner of the field outside the fence, just in the tree line where the palmette bushes grow. I calmed my nerves and reminded myself that I was surrounded by an 8-foot inclinable fence with the gate locked. Yeah, if someone had a gun, then they could have shot me if they wanted to, but they weren't going to actually get to me. If the barbed wire at the top of the fence didn't get them, a face full of weed-eater string blades would. I jumped on the 0 turn and took off mowing, keeping an eye on the back corner during every pass. After about 2 hours, it took multiple runs due to overgrowth, I had an entire front mowed and it was time to hit the back by the creepy corner. I was about to head that way, but the mower blades wouldn't engage. I had to take the covers off, pull the grass out of the belts, and rip grass out of the under of the deck. I had to grease the pulleys and do all sorts of troubleshooting. I finally got the blades to go, but then the gas light came on. I didn't realize it until later, but it felt like something was doing everything it could to keep me from going to that part of the lot. I finally got everything up and running and mowed the back as quickly as possible, doing everything I could to keep a sight on that fence. I finally got done and loaded the mower. I still had to do a little bit of weed eating around the area, but when the weed eater wouldn't start, I knew it was time to go. I hadn't had an issue with it all day, but it was the last hint that I needed to get out of there. After pulling out the gate and locking it behind me, I turned out onto the highway to head home, but not before looking at the back corner one last time. That's when I finally saw it. The unmistakable shadow of a figure standing in the palmettes. It wasn't trying to hide or make itself unseen. It was there. Being at a safe distance from it, I stopped and watched. It moved to the side as if it was bending to try to see me better at the road. It had no distinguishing features, no hair, no clothes, just a person-shaped mass. I decided I had to get as far from there as I could. The thought that I had been so close to it for so long and never saw it sent chills to my core. I called my mom later that night and told her what had happened. She told me that she did some more reading about seeing the deer and learned that they are a sign of protection. Some people believe that a deer means that a higher power is watching over you. After my mom told me that, I couldn't help but think, what if I had not seen the deer that morning? Would I have even seen the shadow? Would it have been able to do something to me? Why did it choose to show itself to me? Is it something about me, or is it tied to that part of the woods? My mom texted me even later that night. She was sitting out on her back step in my old little hometown when she heard some rustling near the storage shed. She shone her phone light into the dark, and what stands there but a deer? Deer never come into the backyard before, but that night a large deer stood tall, staring back at my mom. She told me she felt like it was there to say, "It's okay, he's safe, don't worry, we got him." Y'all, I feel so dumb for not thinking of this before. There has been a lot of land clearing in the area over the last few months. I'm not sure if someone has bought the property that surrounds the site, but a lot of trees have been cut down. Maybe the shadow is tied to the forest. Maybe it saw me mowing the grass and thought I had something to do with the deforestation going on. Do you think this is a stretch? Life's been hard since Mom's death, but as I sat in the mirror rehearsing my lines, I knew I was going to give the performance of my lifetime. Mom, if you're out there, please come home. We're worried about you. And with that, we're near the end of this video. Thank you guys for letting me read your stories. I really enjoyed them all, but I'm always partial to the footstep ones. I have had some ghost stories in my past as well, and I've told one, but it's hard to tell them all, and I've actually had some other narrators, including As the Raven Dreams, tell them. So tell me down below if you'd like me to tell my own ghost stories. Though, I won't lie, they are a little harder for me to read. But as always, I would like to thank the writers who let me read their stories. And I hope you all stay safe from things that mean to do you harm. Now, if you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And of course, if you'd like to help this channel/podcast, please just share it with anyone who might enjoy it. You'd be surprised how much that helps and how much that lets the algorithm know that other people might enjoy this channel as well. Now, if you'd like to help in other ways, I have Patreon where for $1 a month you get early access to the audio and a bonus story once a week. But I also have merch where you can get something else if you like, or PayPal if you just like to buy me a coffee. And none of this is ever expected, but always appreciated. Now, the last thing, and one of the things I really look forward to, is a comment. But let me get you that Sunday word first. On screen right now is everyone who wrote me a sentence last week with the word artist. You guys always paint the greatest pictures with your sentences. Thanks guys, as always. Now, on to this Sunday's word, which is notorious. I've been more picking words that I kind of find fun and just to see what you guys can do with it and have fun with it. Write me a sentence, a story, anything you want down below or at me on Twitter, and you'll be in next week's photo. But as always guys, thank you for just watching and listening. I know I say this every week, but it really does mean a lot to me. It's nice to know that I'm not screaming into that void. Okay, maybe sometimes. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.